Season 2, Episode 7, titled The Handoff, showcases this complexity through its engaging storyline and character growth. This episode acts as a crucial chapter filled with insights, ethical challenges, and a deep dive into identity, especially through Steph's backstory and the central themes of freedom versus control. The episode begins with a haunting look into Steph's history as part of the Canadian resistance against American rule. This background not only enriches her character but also underscores the harsh truths of existence in the wasteland. As she escapes an internment camp with her mother, viewers are confronted with the painful decisions made under oppression. Steph's mother's last words, urging her to dehumanize their oppressors, set the stage for Steph's morally complex journey. Mom's parting advice before she passes: don't view them as human beings, see them as Americans. That's all Steph needs to hear before she slashes her way across the border and heads to Las Vegas, where she encounters Cooper Howard and an unconscious Hank McClane. I suppose when Hank regained consciousness, he appreciated her ruthless, literally, demeanor and welcomed her into Bud's circle, which earned her a spot in the vault. Unfortunately, things aren't looking too good for Steph at the moment. She's facing significant resistance from Overseer Betty of Vault 33, and even more troubling, from her soon-to-be husband, Chet, whom she neglected to inform about their upcoming wedding. Chet has been feeling uneasy for some time, but when he discovers Woody's missing eyeglasses in the garbage disposal, he finally speaks up, revealing Steph's hidden past to everyone in the vault. Steph wasn't born in Vault 31. She's actually 200 years old. Chet proclaims, prompting a few shocked gasps. And she's not even American. She's Canadian. Horrified screams follow. This show certainly captures the U.S. perspective on the rest of the world and, in many instances, its own citizens quite accurately. Meanwhile, in the covert Vault-Tec headquarters beneath New Vegas, Hank McClane's current team is still doing their best impression of Pluribus, working together to mass-produce mind control devices with cheerful smiles on their faces. Hank, still in handcuffs, kindly explains that the dial on the device controller regulates the level of amnesia the subject undergoes, while the mainframe implants new ideas into their minds. Lucy decides she wants to take down that mainframe, and Hank is surprisingly cooperative, or perhaps he believes he can still change her mind, by guiding her to it, sharing a pleasant father-daughter moment as he teaches her how to drive a golf cart through the office. However, just a few steps away from the mainframe door, Lucy has a change of heart about dismantling Hank's mind control program. Having witnessed the horrors of the Legion firsthand, she now encounters a reprogrammed former Legionnaire who is so incredibly polite that he even cautions her about the wet floor he's mopping to prevent her from slipping and injuring herself. Isn't this situation better than what lies outside? Isn't it more desirable to have brainwashed good people rather than free-willed evil ones? Hank, still in handcuffs, kindly explains that the dial on the device controller regulates the level of amnesia the subject undergoes, while the mainframe implants new ideas into their minds. Lucy resolves to destroy that mainframe, and Hank, refreshingly optimistic, believes he can still persuade her otherwise by taking her to see it, sharing a pleasant father-daughter moment as he teaches her to navigate a golf cart through the office. However, just a few steps from the mainframe door, Lucy has a change of heart about dismantling Hank's mind control program. She has witnessed the horrors of the Legion firsthand, but now she encounters a murderous ex-legionnaire who has been reprogrammed, and he is so incredibly polite that he even cautions her about the wet floor he is mopping to prevent her from slipping and injuring herself. Isn't this situation better than what lies outside? Isn't it more desirable to have brainwashed good individuals rather than free-willed malevolent ones? The ghoul simply smiles, and there's a hint of disdain in his grin, as if he once shared the same naivety as Max, and indeed he did. In a pre-war flashback, Cooper Howard rescues Diane Welch, the utterly bland congresswoman who was beaten and imprisoned for protesting corporate interference in politics. "I know you're a good person, and I know you're trying to do the right thing," Cooper tells her. Yes, that's the root of that bitter smile we witness 200 years later. You see, Welch is such a kind-hearted person that she doesn't hold it against Cooper for refusing to hand over the cold fusion diode to her. Instead, she suggests he could give it to the President of the United States, who has just arrived in Vegas. If you were a movie star poorly portraying a world-saving spy, this might seem like a reasonable idea to you as well. Handing unlimited power to the most influential person in the world. What could possibly go wrong? Currently, Max, Thad, and Ghoul Goggins are raiding an NCR armory, which is definitely larger than any single arsenal I've encountered in a Fallout game. Thaddeus attempts to befriend the ghoul since they are both ghouls, although Thaddeus is curious about why his nose hasn't fallen off yet and why he has a second quivering mouth sprouting from his neck. Even the ghoul appears to find that a bit odd. I do, too. The trio strides back into Freeside in a triumphant slow motion, with Max sporting that impressive NCR power armor, which lifts everyone's spirits. However, just as Thaddeus is about to take on sniper duty, his arm suddenly falls off. Yes, his entire arm. Guys, I'm starting to doubt that Thaddeus is truly a ghoul. He might actually be some other kind of mutation. Could he be a centaur? Their torsos lack arms as well, and I really dislike that fate for Thaddeus. Lucy finally sheds the vault jumpsuit, something every Fallout player eventually does, and puts on a dress to enjoy a civilized dinner with her dad. She's jolted back to reality when she speaks to the NCR soldier she met a few episodes ago. I suppose, being a good person, the idea of a 25-year war veteran having his memories wiped so he can serve as Hank's personal waiter just doesn't sit well with her. She handcuffs Hank to the kitchen stove and storms off to destroy the mainframe once more. Meanwhile, Norm tries to reach out to her and Hank from the Vault-Tec skyscraper while briefly escaping Bud's, but neither of them can hear him. At last, we witness the epic confrontation we've been anticipating. Max in his power armor takes on a Deathclaw. Max leaps into the fray, delivering punches and slashes to the Deathclaw. Sure, there were plenty of guns available, my friend, but I understand the temptation to go melee with that armor on, until the Deathclaw escapes and poses a threat to the ghoul, who fires a few ineffective shots with a modified Gauss rifle. However, Max comes to the rescue, decapitating the Deathclaw so the ghoul can finally access the lucky 38. Max then jumps back into the fight against the other two Deathclaws, but he gets tail whipped right off the map, crashing through the gates to Freeside, allowing the monsters to stroll right in. I doubt the citizens will be applauding Max after that stunt. In a flashback, Coop meets with Congresswoman Welch and the President of the United States, yes, it's Clancy Brown, and hands over the cold fusion USB. Fast forward to the present, he connects the same device to New Vegas, only to see Mr. House's computerized face smirking back at him. Does this imply that House's body and brain are still functioning, contradicting several endings of Fallout, New Vegas? Or is it merely a digital backup stored in some hidden memory bank? Oh, and I almost forgot, Lucy reaches the mainframe, and instead of encountering a large computer, she finds Congresswoman Diane Welch's severed but still living head in a jar, complete with that wired skullcap designed by House. She even has her earrings on. I know Reddit enjoys making predictions, and I'm aware many were suspicious of Welch, just like I was, but did anyone foresee her severed head in a jar being connected to Vault-Tec, feeding ideas into mind-controlled amnesiacs 200 years into the future? Anyone? I didn't think so. When Chet discovered the old ID of Vault Overseer Steph Harper, he realized she was over 200 years old. He also found out that although the United States issued that ID, she isn't actually American. Steph hails from Canada, which America brutally annexed in the years leading up to the bombs falling. Why was there a Canadian in Vault-Tec's esteemed executive team? It raised the possibility that Steph might have been a Canadian spy working against her own country. However, in the 7th episode of Fallout Season 2, we find out she is far from that. She's not a villain, rather, she is one of the most relatable characters in the series, a woman on a centuries-long quest for justified revenge against her oppressors. In the Fallout universe, the United States initiated what would become a lengthy process of formally conquering Canada in 2059. As wars erupted globally over resources, America sought to tap into its northern neighbors' wealth of natural materials. The Sino-American War, which featured China's invasion of Alaska, also depicted in Fallout's 2nd season, prompted America to bolster its presence in Canada starting in 2066. Eventually, what began as reluctant cooperation between allies turned hostile, with the U.S. military enforcing its dominance over Little America. As the United States increasingly exploited Canada's resources, the local populace began to resist. Protests and violence ensued. Ultimately, despite some resistance from Americans who were becoming aware of their country's wrongdoings in the North, tensions escalated to the point where the U.S. military opted to seize control of the entire nation. In the summer of 2072, the United States of America officially annexed the Big 51. Despite this moniker, Canada's provinces did not transition into states. Instead, the entire country was designated as a U.S. territory. Canadian citizens were subsequently issued IDs similar to the one Steph had tucked away in her vault room. She and her mother managed to flee from an internment camp that was guarded by U.S. Marines in power armor. Their detention, which occurred prior to the official annexation, indicates that they were specifically targeted. It's possible they were part of the group of Canadians who attempted to detonate the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, a significant factor in the arrival of American forces to their homeland. Alternatively, they could have simply been protesters. Regardless of the reason behind their internment, by the time Steph's mother sustained her fatal injury, both had developed a deep resentment towards America. The United States had taken away their freedom, seized their homeland, and stripped them of their moral compass. On her deathbed, Steph's mother urged her daughter to do whatever it took to survive, even if it meant harming others, assuring her that God would not judge her for it. She advised Steph to view those people not as individuals, but as Americans. Steph took her mother's last command to heart, eliminating anyone who stood in her way as she sought a place that felt warm. She also honored her mother's dying wish to reach the highest branch by securing a position at Vault-Tec. A fortunate meeting with Cooper Howard and a drunk Hank McClain in the warm atmosphere of Vegas made that dream a reality. That minimum wage job eventually propelled proud Canadian/American adversary Stephanie Harper into an executive role within the Vault. The journey to leap 200 years into the future was long and fraught with pain. It involved navigating a treacherous path laid by a once trusted friend who became an enemy, and an immoral nation that sacrificed entire countries to maintain its power for a few more years before contributing to global destruction. It's no surprise that Steph is filled with hatred and seeks vengeance against those who still proudly identify as Americans. Now she simply needs to find a way to escape an American prison once more. The Vault dwellers are aware of the truth regarding Steph. However, they don't know the entire story. They now perceive her as a villain, just as we did before we uncovered her history. It's a heartbreaking past that has transformed one of Fallout's most loathed villains into one of its most compelling and sympathetic characters. Because long before the bombs fell that obliterated the world, even worse monsters turned their weapons against friends. This made Steph a monster in her own right, fueled by righteous anger, who has never forgotten what America did and never will, regardless of how much time goes by. And who could fault her for that? Individuals attempting to leave Canada and cross the border into the safer haven of the United States. If it wasn't evident before that Fallout is a satirical narrative that turns reality upside down, it certainly is now. The opening sequence of Episode 7 is both chaotic and intensely distressing. As Steph prepares for her day, she recalls her attempt to escape from an internment camp in Uranium City, Saskatchewan, which spirals out of control when her unnamed companion, suggested to be her mother, suffers a fatal injury during the escape. Though shaken, she remains resolute and continues her journey south, clearly taking to heart one crucial piece of advice: if you must harm others, God will not judge you. Do not view them as human beings. See them as Americans. The episode then transitions to her ongoing storyline in Vault 32 as Overseer, but we do catch another glimpse of her past. None other than Cooper Howard encounters her in Las Vegas, inadvertently paving the way for her to join Vault-Tec. Quite the wild scenario. All of this lends the cold open of this episode, along with its closing credits animation depicting a nightmarish no man's land along the American-Canadian border, a sense of a haunting nightmare. In the initial flashback, we discover that the tough, one-eyed Steph was once an escapee from a Canadian internment camp. Apparently, Hoser is the preferred anti-Canadian racial slur. She escapes the tyranny of America with the assistance of a suicide bomber who eliminates a power-suited Marine, but tragically loses her fellow escapee Natasha Henstridge in the process. That I'm going to take a wild guess and say it involves eliminating as many Americans as possible by unleashing the forced evolutionary virus and transforming them into Deathclaws. I also suspect that Vault-Tech's plan for Vault 33 has been the same all along, as Norm keeps trying to uncover it while the revived Vault managers keep knocking him out. Sometimes, the actions of those who wish to destroy America and those who claim to want to protect it are indistinguishable from each other. That I assume this is why Steph is in such a frantic rush to marry Chet. Such a union would make her American, more or less, which I believe is her ticket to long-term survival once she sets her trap. But Chet ruins her plans by revealing her as Woody's murderer. He found his glasses in the garbage disposal, and, dun dun dun, a Canadian. As the guests gathered to witness their wedding go wild, Steph, her empty eye socket covered by a bridal white eye patch, flees and locks herself in the overseer's office while the furious Vault dwellers pound on her door. Meanwhile, in Vault-Tech's sacred sanctuary beneath Lucky 38, Lucy McLean turns down her dad's Darth Vader-style offer to bring order to the wasteland as a father-daughter duo. After pretending to get along over a home-cooked meal, dressed in a lovely yellow dress and all, she handcuffs her dad to an oven. Apparently, she's not convinced by his argument that the Legion, known for crucifixions and torture, and the new California Republic, with its high taxes, are equivalent threats that warrant wholesale lobotomization. She speeds off in the golf cart he just taught her to drive towards the mainframe controlling all of his brainwashing implants. Lucy finds out that it's powered by a severed human head. We've observed how that unfolds, naturally. The bombs fall. House continues to exist in a digital format, as the ghoul realizes when he breaks into House's command center. Welch ends up as a nuclear-powered head in a jar. For heaven's sake, the president is portrayed by Clancy Brown, who isn't exactly famous for his heroic roles. As Maud Lebowski once remarked, the entire situation reeks to high heaven. And if Cooper Howard indeed ended up sacrificing the world's future to a truly world-destroying piece of garbage, his later cynicism is quite understandable. Maybe that's why he clings to the widget instead of Maximus, though I wouldn't dismiss the possibility of a hidden agenda. And while the ghoul is stealthily entering the casino, Maximus is battling several Deathclaws in an old suit of new California Republic power armor. The residents of Free Side, who recall the NCR's glorious past, cheer for him, the ghoul, and Thaddeus, whose arm detaches as they near the combat zone. However, after the fight leaves Maximus on the ground and the gates from the Deathclaws' hunting grounds to Free Side wide open, they're likely to change their opinions quite swiftly.